Let's unbox the Black Series 6-inch figure of Woves from The Mandalorian. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. I really enjoyed the Mandalorian storylines in the Clone Wars and Rebels animated series, and of course it was exciting to see more of that explored in the live-action series The Mandalorian, especially in Series 2, where we are introduced to two new characters of Woves and Koska Reeves alongside Bo-Katan. It was really fun to see both of those characters return in Season 3, especially Woves. He got a little bit more of a larger role as leader of the privateers in Season 3. I recently opened up the Hasbro Black Series life-size replica of Woves' helmet. I thought that one was absolutely fantastic. The detail and the paint looks really cool alongside some of my other Black Series helmets, especially Boba Fett, and I thought I would open up my Woves Black Series figure to display alongside the full-size helmet. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll open this one up. We'll take a closer look at the figure and accessories, but first let's take one last look at the packaging. The packaging style for this Black Series figure of Woves is the slightly older Black Series packaging. Of course, Hasbro has released a new updated style, but I do still like this one, very nostalgic, and it does look great if you want to keep your figures in the boxes. We have the Black Series logo here at the top, and for the Mandalorian series, we have this mustard brown color as the accent stripe here across the front for Star Wars The Mandalorian, and of course that same color used for the character name there, Woves. In the front window, we can see the figure, a helmet, a jetpack, and a small blaster pistol here at the side. I do think for this particular figure, the packaging is a little bit awkward. The blaster pistol is a little bit tucked away here. I think with this gap here, I personally probably would have put the blaster pistol here, but I know there is probably some complexities with the way that they have to lay these things out. I don't really know why they decided to tuck it there as opposed to here. I think it would have just been nice to have all of the accessories lined up, but that's just me. Something about this space here, it just looks a little bit awkward. On the side here, we have some fantastic art here of Woves. I think it's a really good likeness of the actor. Of course, he's posed here wearing his armor, holding his helmet, and we have that accent color coming down here at the bottom with the character name in black text there at the bottom. Moving on to the back of the box, we have that same accent stripe here. We can see that this is number 25 of the Black Series line of figures for The Mandalorian. We also have that same art from the side repeated here on the back, a little bit more zoomed and cropped in. It's really great to see that line art detail closer up here. We also have a blurb here describing Woves. A skilled warrior, Woves is loyal to Bo-Katan and is a member of a band of Clan Kryze Mandalorians striking back at the Imperial Remnant. And then of course we have that blurb repeated there in a few different languages. The rest of the packaging is just warning, copyright, barcode, all of that kind of stuff. The window from the front of the box does wrap around a little bit here to the left, and of course this older style of packaging also includes that window at the top. I do find these windows do collect a lot of dust. The new style does not have a window at the top, so we don't get light in at the top, but it's much easier to dust. So if you do like to keep your packaging or your figures in their boxes, I like the new style, less to dust up the top there. Just as a little bit of a conversation piece, I do think it's interesting that this version of Woves was packaged in a standard Black Series box. Now I have on hand here the Cobb Vanth figure, and there is only one difference really between these two. We have one human figure, each with a helmet, each with a jetpack, each with a blaster pistol. The only difference between a standard Black Series and this deluxe Black Series is the blaster rifle. And honestly, here in New Zealand, there is a big price difference between these two figures. Often almost a 50% increase over a standard figure for a deluxe figure. And I don't really think that this blaster rifle accessory is really worth 50% of the price of a standard figure to necessitate all of this sort of extra price tag. I know the box is physically bigger, but honestly, cardboard and a little bit of clear plastic and one small accessory shouldn't really necessitate such a large price increase. Personally, I think we could have fit all of this into this box and just had the blaster rifle packaged in behind the jetpack there. I do love Cobb Vanth. I think he's a great character. I'm trying to collect as many characters from The Mandalorian, especially in the Black Series line, as I can. I just think it's interesting just to see that this was a standard figure, this one was a deluxe, and really the only difference difference is really that blaster rifle. Just kind of interesting. Of course, I'm really happy I wasn't having to pay a deluxe price for this character, and that many of the Mandalorian characters can be packaged in this one alongside the likes of Bo-Katan and Cosca Reeves. I do hope to be able to add many more Mandalorian characters from the series. There are so many fantastic, vibrant armors from the different clans, each with their unique style. I think it's really fun to see so much of the variety of the Mandalorian culture explored in the show. But let's get stuck in and open up this Woves figure. So now I have the Woves figure and the 3 accessories out of the packaging so we can take a closer look. And of course, as always, I'm going to start with the figure. I quite like the facial sculpt of this one. I think it is a pretty good likeness here. And we've got some fantastic digital printing. Back in the day, if Star Wars characters had facial hair, it was a little bit hit and miss as to how it looked. But with this new digital printing, we can do sort of a fine stubble and facial hair with a much better sort of accuracy. It is so fine and low profile. It is just fantastic. Just adding a little bit there. Of course, we've got those really good eyes. Eyebrows painted there as well. Fantastic. The hair is sculpted. Of course, it's not a separate piece attached on the top, but we've got a nice tidy paint line here around the hairline. Just a tiny bit here, right at sort of the widow's peak point here, right at the front, where we've just got a little bit of that skin texture, the skin color, just not quite covered there with the paint. But overall, pretty nice there. We can see going all the way to the back. It'll be interesting to test out the articulation of the neck, because Mandalorians have these collars on their undersuits that come all the way up. We can see that we don't have any skin exposed on the neck. So I'm hoping that we'll still be able to sort of pose the head around. Moving down, of course, Mandalorian armor is going to see a little bit of action. So I really like the weathering effects that we have printed here. Fantastic metallic silver. We've even got a metallic sort of finish here for the iron heart in the center of the Mandalorian chest armor there as well. I really like all these little scratches, of course, exposing the silver Beskar metal underneath. That's really quite fun. Moving down, we've got a nice shiny silver belt buckle here as well. We've got brown pouches. And of course, on the thigh armor, we've also got a little bit more of that Beskar weathering coming through here. I like that it's just kind of a little bit more speckled. It's not just kind of all over the place. We've even got a little bit here on the shoulder, but we don't have it on this side. So I like that it's not too just sort of weathered all over. It looks real and authentic. We've got this really cool blue color coming in with the knees and the gauntlets here on the forearms. This does look kind of a little bit more flat and plastic. There isn't kind of a depth or sort of any kind of weathering or wash over the blue. And compared to the darker tones of the rest of the costume, it does stand out. I think this is going to balance a little bit better once we get to the blue jetpack and the blue helmet on. I feel like there's going to be a better overall balance of the blue to the other darker sort of forest greens and brown colors that we've got here. Coming down, we've got dark boots. I believe they are black. The thigh armor here is so dark, but there is just the tiniest hint of dark green. It's almost like there's a mix between the black. The top armor here is a little bit more of a green. I think these are sort of like a progression between these two. It's kind of a mid part between this dark green and this black. This is almost black, but we can kind of see the black of the gloves here. It's a little bit different. I like that we've just got sort of so many different colors here. The browns around here are different to the grays and sort of different color tones that we have for the pants here. We've got, is that a separate strap? Wow, that's very thin. Okay, the holster has a separate strap. That is one of the thinnest straps I have seen on a Black Series figure. That was really thin. I thought for a minute that was actually sculpted onto the pants, because there's kind of a groove line there with the sculpting of the pants underneath. I thought that was just part of it, but no, that's movable. That's really cool. We can see that we've got the holster there in a dark brown, the same color as the belt. Really fun mix of colors here. I just love seeing the variations and the sort of personalization, the individual color schemes of all the Mandalorians that we see in the live action series. Just fantastic, especially if you enjoy costuming or cosplay. You can take inspiration from just the huge variety and customize your own costume, either inspired by something you saw on screen or just taking inspiration in general for some of the interesting color schemes. think it's interesting that we've got the blue around the front, and then we've even got the sort of straps around the back, which are a pretty good color match for the pants. That just kind of hides in there. Does a pretty good job of sort of blending into the articulation in the back there. We've got even seam lines here of the undersuit, the flight suit. We can see the seam lines coming in, the quilting on the abdomen section here, and sort of the way that the sleeve of sort of the shirt part comes down here, and we can see the sleeves coming through there. Really cool. Something that I noticed when I took the figure out of the packaging that I wasn't expecting, I guess I should have, is that because the chest armor is sculpted as a part of the sort of a vest worn over it, this whole thing is rubbery. I can kind of press it, and because it's so tightly fit to the character, it is kind of hard to show, but this whole sort of area is just a little bit squishy. It's not really rubbery, not like some parts of figures where I can sort of flex them and bend them a lot, and you almost don't notice it because there's just a little bit of compression that I can manage if I just squeeze on the chest. But honestly, looking at it, this looks like hard plastic. It's a really good match. This looks the same as this, and these are completely solid on the thighs here. I thought that was really interesting. And of course, as we should expect, we've got movable shoulder pieces here. We can see that just one little attachment point at the top, so those won't restrict our sort of flexibility. So we should be able to get some really good articulation there in the arms, and you can see we've even got some really good articulation at that mid-torso join there as well. So fantastic details. You can see sort of the quilting, the stitching on the sleeves there showing in that section there. Just even sort of, it's plain at the front, and we get that quilting there, kind of like a bit of protection for the elbows there. Just fantastic, the details. Really cool. We do have a little bit of paint here on the gauntlets, a little bit of a detail there. We've got a little bit of a tiny black part there, but they don't have a wash or anything over the top of them just to sort of dull that blue. But I think it's going to look really cool when we get all of his accessories on. So fantastic. I usually try and go over my figures in the store, see if there is any paint flaws. For this particular figure, it was really consistent. There wasn't anything that was really standing out for me from figure to figure, so I didn't feel, you know, too worried. Sometimes you notice really major flaws on figures and you're like, oh, I'm going to have to watch out for that. This guy was fine. He looked very consistent, especially with that face. Really good likeness. I like that. So let's test out some of the articulation, and then we'll go on to the accessories. So I'm curious to see. Okay, so he actually has a pretty good level of articulation at the neck. I was kind of expecting that I'd get a very stiff neck and that he would mostly move, but I'm getting all that flexibility at the base of the neck rather than at around under the jawline. So I can actually get a fair amount of tipping there. It's a little bit stiff to click side to side because his whole neck is moving there, but he does move pretty well. It holds that position. So once we get the helmet on, we'll be able to get some good sort of posability there as well. And as I briefly showed before, these flexible shoulder bells are fantastic for letting us get those arms all the way up. Just got to make sure I'm pivoting that arm in the right line there. So all the way up, no worries there. Very great. And of course we can rotate up. If I'm going to swing it all the way around, I'm going to start to impact here, but of course we don't need to swing our arms backwards and forwards quite like that. And I personally like it if I can get the arms posed where I feel like the shoulder bells are sort of matching up with the arms. If you've worn a sort of Star Wars costume armor, there is often costumers usually have like a strap or something like that to help keep the shoulder armor sort of sitting on your shoulders so they don't sort of fly about and get misaligned. Of course, on toys, we're not going to have those small straps, but I like to envision a small sort of strap or some other attachment, like we see on the show when the Mandalorian Din Djarin gets his new sort of shoulder piece and Bo-Katan get a new shoulder piece. The Mandalorians kind of have like a little bit of electronics in behind their armor pieces to sort of connect them on. So I like to think of the pieces as sitting very tightly close to the body because they're there for protection, and of course they would be sort of more attached. So I like to keep my posing where the armor pieces stay in line with the arms rather than sort of having them sort of flying off like this. To me, that just looks a little bit awkward, but so I generally try and keep mine in line. But let's test the elbows there. So we do have a little bit of armor on the Mandalorian figures, which can impact a little bit of movement. I'm curious to see how these legs are going to work because this This armor on this side is very high. But let's see. Now, he doesn't come with a blaster rifle, just that one blaster pistol. But should I want to customize or perhaps get a spare blaster rifle from someone else, I can get his hands into a pretty good blaster rifle configuration there. That looks pretty cool. And of course, we've got very good movement there on the hands. He's got a very nice extended trigger finger on his right hand, as we should expect. Good size grip there. And on the other hand, just sort of the more classic circular grip there. Very nice to move. They don't feel loose. They hold their position well, and very good elbows there. We can rotate around. Very nice feeling to the arms on this particular figure. As I showed before, we've got quite good sort of side to side sort of movement there, and I've got a little bit more forward. We can move back a little bit. We can see that full abdomen detail there when I lean him back. I like it when I can really move my figures around and I don't start to expose joins. Sometimes on some of the 3.75-inch figures, if I start moving them around, sometimes I can kind of see the attachment points. It always makes me a little bit nervous, but Black Series is a bit bigger. He doesn't really want to turn very much. I can kind of hear things creaking, but I can turn him around reasonably well. I'm probably getting a little bit of twisting with this torso piece here, but I can twist him to the side. It does make me a little bit nervous because it's making a lot of noise there. But yes, I do like that we've got, you know, the sort of posability with this kind of motion. I like that. Okay, let's test out the legs. So looking at the back, we can see that we have that articulation point where we can swivel the thighs at the top. It's probably going to be very stiff because he's fresh out of the box, but I can see that. Very stiff, but yes, I can swivel the thighs at that top point. We can see that we've got a seam line sculpted here into the pants, so it's always nice. I generally like to keep those aligned, but of course, if you're posing from the front, you're not going to see the fact that that's unaligned. You can see that stitch line there on the front, but the rest of it's hidden under the armor there. And this one, we've got this tiny strap, so I am worried about potentially lifting this one up. I don't want to snap this in the slightest. I love the holster details on modern figures, so I'm just going to pull this one up very gently and see where this goes. Okay, so you can see that the top of the thigh armor here is just kind of hitting into the articulation point there at the hip, but I can actually get his leg up way higher than I was expecting to. Kind of looks like he's balancing on one foot there, but that is really cool. I was not expecting to be able to get it up so high, especially since that little strap goes under here. I thought that would be quite restrictive. That's really nice. We've got all of this sort of costume detail, the thigh armor that comes up really high. We can still get the leg up that high. That is just fantastic. I'm just going to move that back very slowly. Let's check the other leg. Okay, again, pretty high. We can see that that armor just kind of comes in here at that thigh join at the hip there. Very nice. Let's test out the knees. Stiff as always because they're fresh out of the box, but there we go. Pretty standard. Of course, the sculpting, we've got that strap for the knee armor that's just kind of sitting in the back of the knee. So that's just providing a little bit of a stop point there, but that's a really nice angle. And then stiff boots, but we can get all the way to there. That's a pretty good angle. I really like if I put his boot back in the right position. The stitching detail on around the base of the boots, you know, like where the leather boots would actually be stitched to the sole. Fantastic detail. All of these tiny little stitching lines. Just fantastic. I love that. Okay, just a quick check. Oh, this needs a little bit more freer. We can even see some of that detail there on the top of the boots. Really cool. Okay, so the armor is not really impacting the flexibility. I thought with this really this high thigh point, that might be an issue, but fantastic. Cool. He's going to be an easy one to pose. I also found that he was pretty sturdy and steady and easy to stand straight out of the box. Just a little bit of tweaking to the ankles and he stood up fine by himself. He's very nice and steady. A really great figure. But of course, I haven't balanced him with a jetpack on the back. So of course, on the back of the costumes, they do look a little bit awkward and a little bit plain without their jetpacks. We have 3 attachment points here, a circular peg hole and these 2 little slots there. We can sort of see the shoulder straps and armor that is going to come around to the back. So let's go through his accessories and get Axe Woves all fully dressed. So this is a fantastic jetpack. This is really cool. The blue and silver is giving me strong Jango Fett vibes, and I'm here for it. This looks fantastic. Really nice paintwork here. The silver looks pretty tidy. We've got some really nice details. Really nice. There is a little bit of movement with these sort of little exhaust sort of the bits here at the bottom. There is a tiny bit of sort of a little bit of roughness to the plastic casting here on this particular one. This one's a little bit smoother, but that's really minimal, and it's on the underside. I just kind of noticed that looking at it really up close, but very nice. And then on the back we can see those attachment points there that hopefully will fit fairly nicely on the figure. Sometimes I find these pegs are a little bit short. You really got to push them on, otherwise they feel like they're going to fall off very easily. This one's kind of a short peg, so let's see how easily this is going to fit on his back, because this peg hole does look like it's a reasonable depth, so curious that this looks shorter. Okay, so hopefully those little, sometimes I find when there's more than one peg attachment point, getting all three to line up can be an issue. So I'm hoping that that is going to be okay. That feels like that's a pretty, I wouldn't say it's the sturdiest, but that feels at least secure. I don't think that's going to fall off. Sometimes when I'm putting my figures together and I just nudge it slightly, see, I can move his torso with that rather than having that fall off, so that feels good. I like the proportions there, and now that we're getting more blue on the figure, the blue of those other smaller pieces is starting to sort of come together with the rest of his accessories. So I'm going to go with the blaster pistol next, and let's see how well he's still standing up. Great, that's fantastic. So we have a very small Mandalorian blaster pistol here. This does look very similar to others that we have seen, in particular Bo-Katan. Pretty sure this is the same blaster. It's fairly flat. We've got a very dark, just speckled sort of gunmetal gray across the top, and a classic metallic silver finish here for the underside. We've got a little bit more of that dark gray there for the bottom. We've got an open sort of trigger guard there. It's just kind of a little bit of a circle cut out there. It's fairly flat, but of course there are some small sculpted details just in the surface. I'm hoping he will hold this well because it is fairly small, and also we'll test it out in his holster as well. So because we have that trigger guard, I don't think it's going to fit well in his left hand, but we'll test that out anyway. So let's pop that in his hand, if his hand's going to hold still for me. So let's wiggle that in. That's actually a little bit tight. Okay, and because the trigger guard is kind of just open, I'm just going to try and press that down. It's actually a little bit stiff. There we go. So I got that hooked into his finger. So that looks all correct and proper, like he's actually holding it. And he holds that really well, because that was just a little bit of a tight grip there. Sometimes trying to put in accessories that are a little bit tight, because we can articulate at the wrists, it just takes a little bit of a wrestling to get it in there. But that looks great. It is kind of a small blaster for a Mandalorian. You know, weapons are their religion. I kind of think, you know, sometimes you expect them to have maybe more. You know, maybe two, like Bo-Katan or something like that. But yes, he comes with the one there. So I'm just going to quickly try to see how he will hold this in his other hand, because we don't have quite the same shape. Okay, because it has that sort of cut out trigger guard on the underside, even though his trigger finger is not separate, it doesn't need to hook through a circle. I can actually just put that there in his hand, and he can actually hold that one fairly easily there as well, which is fun. Not a lot of blasters actually fit well into the second hand, into the left hand, especially because their trigger fingers are not separated like this one. So nice to see that. You can put it in both hands. Okay, so let's try it here. I'm not sure why there is a hole in this particular holster. I haven't really come across that very often. Perhaps that has been used, or is it an accuracy thing? So that actually goes all the way down, so we can just glimpse a little bit of the silver through that. I'll have to rewatch some episodes of The Mandalorian and actually see if that is part of his holster on the screen. This holster is sealed at the bottom. We don't have a hole, so it looks all pretty nice and secure in there. that fits really well in there. So I'm just gonna, yep, that comes out nice and clean as well. So perfect, we can pose that in his hands without any issue. And I've been handling him a lot and his jetpack still hasn't come out, so that's great as well. That's just, it's fun when you don't need to fight with your figures, when things just kind of come together looking great. Cool. Okay, so last but not least, we've got his iconic Mandalorian helmet, and I just opened up Hasbro's Black Series full-size electronic helmet, so I'm a little bit more familiar. I'm just having opened up the full-scale one, so this is fantastic. We've got a very dark gray here around the black visor, which of course isn't see-through, it's an opaque black. The whole helmet is made out of the blue plastic that we see used, but of course this one is squishy. It does help put the helmets on over the heads there. Generally in the Black Series we don't have the swappable head helmets that we do in a lot of the modern 3.75-inch vintage collection figures. That sometimes helps with the scale. Sometimes when you have a plastic helmet fitting over a plastic head, the whole thing ends up being a little bit larger than say a full sculpted sort of helmet would be. So we pop the heads on and off, especially in that smaller scale, but for the Black Series we have the rubber helmets. I don't like popping heads and body parts off my figures, but I can understand the sort of accuracy concerns of having helmets that fit over the top. Now, something that's really quite fun about the Black Series line is of course we can do some really cool details that are very hard to do in a smaller figure line, and we've got a movable rangefinder here. You can see it is joined under the earpiece here, and we can swivel that down so it's in line. Really cool. I really like the silver, again, a sort of Beskar exposed weathering that we have around here, around the visor. Not really much weathering in the rest of the helmet. We've got this dark grey continuing from the visor around to the back, and of course that detail down the back. And then for Woves, we have this paler grey sort of circle around sort of the top rim of the helmet, and looking up really close there is sort of a little bit of weathering to this paint job. It's not perfectly sort of, we've got these little cutouts and little scratches around the paint to give a little bit of a weathering effect, but there isn't additional kind of Beskar scratches or sort of any other sort of airbrushing or splatter or any kind of weathering on the rest of this helmet. But I think in respects to the weathering and paint effects of the figure itself, I think this is really well done. So this one looks just a little bit pinched in, but that generally corrects itself when we put it over the figure. So for Woves, he does have raised hair, but not as much as other characters. So I'm hoping this won't be too much of an issue in putting the helmet on this particular figure. So just squeezing that in a little bit, that just pops all the way down on his head. Very nice. And now we have Woves fully kitted out. And now that blue really comes together when we've got his gauntlets, knees, jetpack and helmet. That's all come together looking fantastic. The helmet's just maybe just a little bit squished. I might just have to sort of give that time being on the head. When I sort of just tweak it a little bit, I've got a slightly better shape, but of course being on the head, it's going to sort of hopefully sort of straighten itself out a little bit over time. But I think that looks really cool. He's all kitted out. This is fantastic. This is the kind of thing where I honestly don't mind if Hasbro does a little bit of repaints and gives us some of the other sort of background Mandalorians from the show to really sort of flesh out a full display. I really like the details of this figure. And of course, there are some really standardized Mandalorian pieces that we've seen throughout the show. Of course, the show themselves would have wanted to reuse armor parts and things like that. The very skilled prop makers and costume makers on the show, once they've sculpted pieces, they can make multiples and simply paint them differently. So I'm sure there is a lot of, you know, reused part usage on the show, which would be fantastic for Hasbro to just sort of go and reuse parts and give us a whole bunch of different Mandalorians. Of course, we always want the heroes, the named characters, but there are so many unique sort of prominent Mandalorians in the show that don't have specific names that I still want to add to my collection. This guy looks really really cool. So of course we see him prominently on the show, sometimes alongside, sometimes at odds with Bo-Katan. And I have her from the Black Series line. This one was released a little while ago, but we can see that he is a pretty good scale to Bo-Katan as well, being a bit taller than her. I think they look pretty cool alongside each other. I'm really keen to build out my collection of Mandalorians. It's really neat to see. I think these two look really cool together. We can see that she does have more sort of weathering on her blue armor parts there, which he has a darker blue but no weathering there. This looks really cool. Oh, it's always fun. I had so much fun unboxing his helmet, and now I've got the Black Series figure to put alongside it. So this was really fun. I know he's not a main character, certainly not at the level of Boba Fett or the Mandalorian himself, but I liked that we got to see more of him after his brief appearance in season 2. It's fun to see him come back for a larger role in season 3, and I hope we see more of him continuing on. There are so many fantastic Mandalorians that we were introduced in the show. I want to see more of them in future Mandalorian content, whether that's more seasons of The Mandalorian or of course the upcoming movie, The Mandalorian and Grogu. I'm hoping to see lots of returning familiar faces. This is a really cool figure. I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars Black Series figure and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again really soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Black Series fan, I recently unboxed the Dark Trooper Deluxe figure. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Black Series unboxing playlist. This is the way.